For this presentation, I have chosen to speak about the organization called 1MDB. 1Malaysia Development Berhad, 1MDB, is an insolvent Malaysian strategic development company, wholly owned by the Minister of Finance, that took shape in 2009. Since 2015, the company has been under heavy scrutiny for its suspicious money transactions and evidence pointing to money laundering, fraud, and theft. A lawsuit filed by the United States Department of Justice alleged that at least $3.5 billion has been stolen from Malaysia's 1MDB state-owned fund. Its early initiatives included buying privately owned power plants and planning a new financial district in Kuala Lumpur. The fund proved better at borrowing. It accumulated $12 million in debt than at luring large-scale investments. Now, let's jump into the details of the crisis. What exactly happened in this 1MDB crisis? Investigators have been trying to trace how money flowed from and around 1MDB and illegally into personal accounts. The US Justice Department says that more than $4.5 billion flowed from the fund through a complex web of opaque transactions and fraudulent shell companies to finance spending sprees by corrupt officials and their associates. Swiss investigators say that up to $7 billion passed through 1MDB and one of its units. The US alleges that a small coterie of Malaysians led by businessman Low Tech Joe, also known as Joe Low, diverted money from 1MDB into personal accounts disguised to look like legitimate businesses and kicked back some of those funds to officials. Some of the money is alleged to have ended up with Najib and his family. That includes $681 million that landed in Najib's personal bank account, according to US prosecutors. Malaysia's then Attorney General, backed by Saudi authorities, said that in 2016 the $681 million was a donation from the Saudi royal family, much of which was returned. US investigators say the money instead came from and was returned to an offshore entity allegedly controlled by Joe Low. Malaysia's new Prime Minister, Mahathir Mohamad, says his country is seeking to recoup billions of dollars of 1MDB funds, including fees from Goldman Sachs. The bank made $593 million working on 3 bond sales that raised $6.5 billion for 1MDB in 2012 and 2013, dwarfing what banks typically make from government deals. Now, how was this crisis handled? First of all, let's unfold who exactly are investigating the scandal. There are probes related to 1MDB in at least 10 countries, focused on possible embezzlement or money laundering. The US Justice Department identified about $1.7 billion in assets that it says were illegally acquired through money diverted from 1MDB, including real estate, art, a luxury yacht, and proceeds from the film The Wolf of Wall Street. Its first charges against individuals were announced in November. Singapore and Switzerland have imposed financial penalties on several banks for lapses in anti-money laundering controls related to funds allegedly from 1MDB. According to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, also known as the FBI, possible witnesses are too scared to talk because they feared retaliation. Malaysia's new government revived the country's own probes after the previous administration joined 1MDB in assisting all monies that were accounted for. These investigations lead us to the next part. Who exactly were charged for this crisis? Najib was charged with dozens of counts of corruption, criminal breach of trust, and money laundering involving 1MDB related money. He has denied wrongdoing and pleaded not guilty for all his charges. His wife, on the other hand, was also charged. Luxury items and cash seized by police from various premises linked to Najib were valued at about 1.1 billion ringgit, which is the equivalent to $239 million. Authorities are seeking a quick sale of a 250 million ringgit yacht owned by Joe Low. He was initially charged in absentia with 8 counts of money laundering, though his whereabouts aren't publicly known. in the first criminal charges against Goldman Sachs since it got embroiled in the scandal. Malaysia is seeking fines in excess of $3.3 billion. Malaysia alleges that Goldman Sachs misrepresented to investigators that the proceeds of 1MDB bond sales would be used for legitimate purposes, when the bank knew that the funds would be misappropriated. Related charges were also filed against Tim Lesner, Goldman's lead banker for 1MDB bond issues, and Lesner's deputy, Roger Ng. Goldman says that the charges against the bank are misdirected and it will vigorously defend them. Separately, ex-1MDB president Arul Kanda and Najib have been charged for their alleged roles in tampering with a state audit report into 1MDB. Conclusively, US authorities are preparing to return about $200 million of funds allegedly misappropriated from troubled state fund 1MDB to Malaysia, according to people familiar with the matter. The total includes about $140 million from the sale of a stake in New York's Park Lane Hotel and some US $60 million from a settlement paid by the producer of The Wolf of Wall Street, who asked not to be named as the details are private. The transfer could happen as soon as next week, they said. Malaysian Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad has reached out to countries from Switzerland to Singapore for help in tracking and recouping the $4.5 billion believed to have been siphoned from 1MDB. The scandal surrounding the state fund, set up to finance development projects in Southeast Asian nations, has ensnared people and institutions from Malaysia's former leader Najib Razak to Goldman Sachs Group Incorporated. For Malaysia, it is now a time of healing and for patience in the rise of the local economy. Although this crisis took a toll on the nation, it is safe to say that the pieces are slowly falling back together.